Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Blindseyepodcast, the podcast discussing everything you did and didn't want to know about being blind. I am your host, Connor, and this week I'm going to unfortunately be talking about what I've tried to steer away from for 7 weeks now, which is COVID 19. Because I thought it would be interesting to speak about, not only how it's made us all have to adapt, but in the specific ways I guess I've had to adapt. And yeah, definitely not like it's not a woe is me episode or anything like that. I just thought it'd be interesting because it might have been stuff that I guess people might not have thought of before. So stay tuned for that. As usual, these are just my thoughts and opinions and experiences. So I have to give this little disclaimer just in case somebody gets back to me and says otherwise. All right, so COVID 19 and blindness. This motherfucker. So, like everybody else, things have had to change, especially when it comes to social distancing, again, like everybody else. But when you can't see, there's a bit of an issue about how do you social distance. For example, I'm mostly out with my guide dog, and she doesn't know what 1.5 meters is. I don't know what 1.5 meters is because I can't see the distance to somebody else, um, especially if I can't hear them. Some people are just kind of standing quietly in a line. I don't know that they're there, or I don't know how far away they are. Even if I do know that they're there, there's also the issue that there are the markers that are on the floor, but I can't see them. I don't know where they are, and the dog can't learn 1.5 meters away from somebody else. So these have all been new things to try and get your head around, and just like everybody else, you're lining up and you're trying to keep your distance, and I've been trying to keep my distance, but I don't know how much is too much. I don't know if I'm standing too far back. I'm worried that I may be standing in like a through way, a thoroughfare, and you don't want to be in everybody's way, but you want to do the right thing. So that's been a real interesting adaptation, which I still haven't really figured out, but it's something we've all had to deal with, but just something that isn't necessarily as straightforward in my own case. I've even had a few instances as well where you might have seen, like some places have maybe a table in front of the counter to like physically stop you from getting too close. And I've had a few instances where obviously I haven't known that that's there, and I've completely walloped myself into it, which will definitely keep me apprehensive in the future. But as like everybody else, you just have to do these things and try and adapt to the current state of the world. Some real biggies for me though have been touch, because obviously when you can't see, you're using your hands so much more to know where things are. You're feeling tables, you're feeling for FPOS machines to pay for things, or you're touching poles to cross the road or get on a train, get on a bus. And all of these things all of a sudden now have an element of risk with them, because if I'm trying to pay for something, a lot of the times the FPOS machine isn't there, or I can't see it, and it's a lot easier for somebody to just hand it to me, or maybe grab my hand and put it on the machine. But that now is against the rules and brings a certain amount of risk in it. But not everybody is as good as others in kind of giving verbal directions to where something is. So that's been a really interesting challenge to try and get over, because you have to do things, but you're trying to do the right thing at the same time. As I said as well, when it comes to trains or buses or taxis, I've just completely stopped using trains and buses. I think, most people have in general anyway. But for me, when I get on a train, I have to touch the train. I can't just step onto it. I have to touch the side of the door. I have to grab a pole. I have to feel for the seat, all these kinds of things. And now they're all things that I don't want to be doing for obvious reasons. But even when it comes to, getting up and down the platform, or, touching the turnstile and things like that, I have to touch all of those things. And it's pretty grubby even at the best of times, let alone when there's a global pandemic going on. Another interesting development has been trying to get around with other people, because when you can't see, sometimes you're in places that and you're happy to walk around in freely. But in other situations, you might grab the elbow of somebody that you're with, which is called a sighted guide. And, if I'm with my mom or with my friends or something, it makes more sense. It's more efficient in that space to do that. Maybe because the dog is a bit confused or whatever it might be. But now, we're not supposed to be touching each other and doing all these things. So something that is so beneficial and almost kind of built in to me at this point, I can't really do, or I shouldn't be doing. I had the case the other day where I was learning a new area with my guide dog instructor, and the first time you would do it, you would take the elbow of the instructor and you would just walk it through. You wouldn't expect the dog to actually, be in control or to be leading me. And that's usually what we would do. But now, company rules say she can't do that. And, just personally, neither of us want to be doing that. So that's been a new challenge, because you rely on that to learn new things. And it's just, an adaptation, just like it is for everybody else. There was as well quite a major issue, more so at the beginning of the pandemic here in Australia, like in March, where everybody was going absolutely nuts buying stuff in supermarkets, like, the world was going to end, or, they were prepping for, I don't know, the United Nations or something to come and take all their stuff. But you had this problem where elderly people or people with disabilities, and even just the general public that couldn't get to the supermarket at ideal times, couldn't get their hands on things, and everybody else was taking everything. So thankfully here, most of the major retail chains set up kind of a priority delivery online shopping experience, because you were having this thing where people were running into the shops because they could spot, the one last thing on the aisle. But somebody like me, I can't really go in and trawl the aisles like everybody else can, because there's just so much going on. But if I was to walk up to the service desk in the supermarket, I'd say, I'm looking for this, and they're all out, because the early bird gets the worm, and the early bird can move a bit more freely than I can. So that was a major issue in the beginning. It's not so much an issue now, but at the same time, the whole crisis isn't over. So it's hard to know, is that going to rear its head again? So hopefully not, but it was something that in the beginning was quite difficult. The last interesting thing for me, though, will be the whole mask thing, because thankfully here in Australia, we haven't really been told to wear masks. I mean, maybe now in Melbourne, they're kind of saying if you feel you can't keep your distance from other people, then you should be wearing a mask. But I'm pretty sure as well, like, the masks have to be worn a certain way. So, I know you have to have the little metal strip at the top over your nose, but I'm fairly sure that with most of the masks, there's a certain side that has to be facing your mouth and a certain side that has to be facing out. And I have no idea which is which. So that will be interesting. I'm going to have to try and find a way to get around that. Otherwise, I'm going to look like an idiot, but an exposed idiot. But we'll meet that when we come to it. So anyway, I hope that was kind of interesting and a little perspective. Again, it's not meant to be a woe is me, because this stuff has hit us all, but we all have our little adaptations based on our life situations that we've had to come up with. As usual, you can get in touch with me via email. So you can email me at blindseyepodcast@gmail.com. That's BLINDSEYE podcast@gmail.com. You can tweet me at blindseyepod, and you can find me on Facebook if you search for Blindseye Podcast. I'm also hoping next week to have a guest on. I'm lined up to speak with her on Monday, and we're going to be talking about sports, like blind sports, and how that all works, and I guess some of the misconceptions people might have about how all of that works. So I'm hoping that'll be a nice little surprise, because there's a few things there that I actually didn't know and I was surprised by. So hopefully we can get together on Zoom on Monday, and I'll have that for you later next week. In the meantime, thanks very much for listening, and take care. Cheers.